told them nothing. Now that was early on before we got to these parables, but note what that says. Without a parable, he told them nothing. Now what you didn't notice is there was a chunk that was taken out this morning where the disciples come to him about one of the other parables, and they beg him, please tell us, what does this mean? Apparently they were very good Lutherans. They did not understand. Why? Because he taught in ways that seemed impenetrable and indecipherable. Jesus was a great disappointment to many. Even those who followed him, he continued to disappoint them because he would tell these parables. Now, some of them seem to make sense. I mean, right off the bat, people could kind of figure them out. But most of them, you needed a little more instruction. Now, you heard the quote that I mentioned at the very beginning today. Well, I'm happy to say that as a pastor, I'm very fortunate that I don't have to lead exactly like Jesus did. Because if I led like Jesus, what I would do is everything I would say and teach, whether it be preaching, teaching, or in any meeting, it would be in parables. Now, who would like to sign up and call a pastor like that? Raise your hand high. I don't know, you can't pan down, but not even in the back did they do it. Not a single one. We like to understand things, don't we? I mean, really, when you go to school, do you want the teacher to tell you things that you can't understand and to say, oh, by the way, here's a 100-point quiz. If you get one thing wrong, you fail. Does that sound like a plan? I don't think so. Who among you would like to go to work and then be told, this is your job, and be given a spiel where you had no idea what they were talking about, and then they said, go to it, and by the way, at the end of the day, if you don't do it exactly the way I want it, you're fired. Only the baby is signing up for that. We want things that make sense. Our world, we want sensible things. And here comes Jesus, who makes no sense most of the time to most people. Truly, he was a disappointment, a leader who disappointed, and in his case, beyond the point where they could tolerate it, it became intolerable. So why in the world would we teach with parables? Why? Well, the short answer is, of course, because Jesus did. But parables, sort of like fables, for those who remember way, way back even before Jesus' time. Parables, but in a much shorter way, tell a quick story with great truth. And it's not just necessarily a great truth that we can observe as we go about our life, but it is great truth about God and faith. Without a parable, he told them nothing. This was to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophet. I will open my mouth to speak in parables. I will proclaim what has been hidden from the foundation of the world. Now, the kingdom of heaven is like. The kingdom of heaven is like. In Jesus' time, people were searching for the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven as far as both here on earth now, that is God's kingdom now, and God's kingdom in the afterlife. They were searching hungry. So instead of just telling them bullet point by bullet point and just giving them the facts, because it's so often true, if you just give facts, there'll always be somebody to say, well, I doubt that. Or, I don't think that's a fact. Or, my opinion is I just choose not to accept the facts. Instead, Jesus teaches through parables, truth stories. You can try to argue about them, but in the end, they are stories of God's truth. They're not facts. They're not statistics. The truth about God. And by learning about the truth about God, we learn the truth about us. Now, I said I'm fortunate that I don't have to be a leader like Jesus. Instead, as I was reaffirmed at the seminary this past week with various speakers, I've chosen the path of being a collaborative leader that is working together. But I can still learn, and we can still learn by the one who led in a very different way, in the one who led in a radical way, in the one who led in a very dangerous way. This one we call Jesus, who comes from Nazareth, the Anointed One, the Christ. Because he has a lot of truth to tell us. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like, whether it's treasure in a field or one great pearl of great value, or a net thrown into the sea, or the smallest seed that grows into a rather large bush. The kingdom of heaven is like. Well, in this day and age, like what? We have these parables and we begin to understand as Jesus talks to us how precious the kingdom of heaven is. That we would give anything to obtain it. And not only do we just hold on to it, but as you know, in his other parables, we share the good news of it with all the world. But what is the kingdom of heaven like today? The kingdom of heaven is like a group of farmers showing up to harvest the fields for a farmer with cancer who cannot do the harvesting. The kingdom of heaven is like the members of Our Savior's Lutheran Church who volunteer at the Spring Valley Food Bank and those who provide funds and food for the food bank, both here in our church and throughout the whole community. The kingdom of heaven is like a people who collect a portion of the fruits of their labor, their money, and weekly give it to Our Savior's, OSL. And they don't spend it all on themselves, but instead they give a bunch of this money away, and mostly to people who they don't know and will never meet. We call these people members of OSL, or in other words, radical followers of Jesus. And some people might call them, as they called me, fools for Christ. Because only foolish people would do that. Only foolish people would follow a leader like Jesus who speaks in parables. The kingdom of heaven is like people of OSL and the Methodist Church here in town and a larger community who support and do the work of sending food home to children and their families on a weekly basis for 9 months out of the year. The kingdom of heaven is like a church which recognizes that those who are under 30 years of age and call themselves spiritual but not religious, that is, they no longer affiliate themselves with a particular denomination or maybe even a particular church, that recognize these religious nuns, as they're called, N-O-N-E-S, by the way, recognize that since 2008, when they were 19% of that population, by last year they'd risen to 37% of that population. And the kingdom of heaven is like people who are willing not to judge them, but instead to be in relationship with them, to listen to their spiritual journey, to just share their own spiritual journey. And in doing so, displaying the transformative love of God, so that they will know the kingdom of God has drawn near to them, and will not forget them after today, but will continue to keep them in their prayers. The kingdom of heaven is like the people of OSL in the larger community, who provide school supplies and backpacks to any and all who need, and provide right here a place where children will draw and chalk underneath the OSL cardboard, just like they did last summer. The kingdom of heaven is like the OSL Facebook community, connecting diverse people together. The kingdom of heaven is like a congregation which believes that church belongs to God, not to them. And the church is not driven by them, but the church is driven by God. The kingdom of heaven is like a congregation which focuses first on meeting the needs of others outside the walls of the church before we meet our own needs. The kingdom of heaven is like a congregation who welcomes all. Just like that sign outside that says everyone is welcome, all are welcome. The kingdom of heaven is like a congregation who welcomes all by reaching out to them, reaching out to all, inviting them, being in relationship to them, welcoming them in, rather than waiting for them to arrive. The kingdom of heaven is a congregation which exhibits biblical hospitality to all who enter. And then when they exit out into the community, they share this hospitality to all. The kingdom of heaven is like a people of God who say and live the word, Amen. Yes, it shall be so.